welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making an old-fashioned gingerbread molasses cake. I had a lot of requests for old-fashioned gingerbread cake, and where that came from is about 2.5 weeks ago I done a recipe on a old-fashioned stack cake, Appalachia stack cake, and that video went through the roof. A lot of people associated their early years of grandma or mama making the stack cake for weddings and different things like that. I got so many really beautiful, kind comments out of that video. It was really something. But I did get a lot of requests about the gingerbread molasses cake because I had mentioned it in my video. So I wanted to come back and I wanted to do the old-fashioned gingerbread molasses cake. And it's really easy to put together. Now, for my research, gingerbread cake, I mean, it goes as far back as the 18th century. And the Europeans brought it over to America. They brought the molasses over, and what it did is they say it makes a softer, molasses makes a softer cake. It makes it softer than sugar would. But in this recipe, there's going to be sugar and molasses. And the molasses that I'm going to be using, it is a Golden Barrel unsulfured blackstrap molasses. Now this is a strong molasses. So if you don't want anything that strong in your cake, because it won't be as sweet, just use a regular unsulfured molasses. It'll be a little bit sweeter to you. Not the blackstrap, but just regular molasses. But I'm going to be using the blackstrap. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got my oven heated to 350. I'm using a 9 by 13 pan, and I've got it greased and floured. And I've got some boiling water here. There's 1.5 cups of hot water. And what I'm going to do, and it's hot too, is I'm going to pour it in my bowl. And then I'm going to take 1.5 cups of my molasses, and I'm going to pour it in with my hot water. Now this molasses is so dark, and it's just not as sweet as maybe your table molasses. But I will be putting a little bit of sugar in, like I said, so it'll help maybe the bitter taste. So it was 1.5 cups of molasses and 1.5 cups of hot water that I'm mixing together. And I'm just going to let that sit here for just a minute. And over here I've got, and there's a lot of butter in this cake. There's 12 tablespoons of butter here, which is 3/4 of a cup. And I melted it, but then I cooled it off. So you can see it is melted, but it's cooled off. It's not hot. And the reason why you don't want it hot, because you're going to add 2 large eggs to it. So I'm going to add my large eggs to my melted butter. Just stir it up good. Then I've got my sugar. I've got 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and I'm going to put my 3/4 cup of sugar in here with my butter and my 2 eggs. And I'm going to stir that up really good. Now here in my bigger bowl, I've got 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And I did sift it, because sifting your flour will make a softer cake. And in my bowl right here, I've got all my spices. I've got 2 1/4 teaspoons of baking soda. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of ginger. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. I've got 3/4 of a teaspoon of cloves and 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just using my pink Himalayan salt. So I'm going to put all my spices in here with my all-purpose flour. And I'm just going to stir my dry ingredients up real good. Get them mixed up good. Now I know, if y'all remember on my stack cake, I talked about how I remember my grandmother's molasses gingerbread cake. And she made it a lot because that was Grandpa's favorite. And she would get it out of the oven while it's hot. We'd put some butter on it and we'd eat it while it's hot. But it always made the house smell so good when it was baking. If you've ever made gingerbread cookies, that's pretty much the taste. So I've got my dry ingredients all mixed up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to alternate my molasses mixture it's cooled down just a little bit. I'm going to pour my molasses mixture in here with my flour. And the flour is going to cool the molasses down. And then I'm going to put my butter and sugar mixture in here. And I'm just going to keep alternating it like that. And put a little bit more molasses and water mixture. Me and Mr. Brown really love molasses. We like the table molasses to eat with biscuits and butter because it's just a little bit sweeter than the blackstrap. But if you want to make the real traditional old-fashioned molasses gingerbread cake, it was made with blackstrap because that's what they had. I'm going to put a little bit more of my egg and butter and sugar mixture. Now I didn't get my mixer out because I wanted to do this by hand because really and truly it's easy to mix up. You don't need to get your mixer and all that stuff out with it. Okay, I'm going to put more of my molasses mixture. And I'm going to put the rest of my egg and butter and sugar mixture. And I know 12 tablespoons, that sounds like a lot of butter, but that's there's no shortening or oil or anything in this cake. And you know what? It's okay in moderation, so it'll be okay. We don't eat gingerbread cake very often. So I'm going to keep stirring this and getting this mixed up. And you can see how dark it looks. I think I'm going to get my wooden spoon . That's better. Now it looks like it's going to be lumpy, but it'll come out smooth. The more you mix it and I'm going to I'm not going to put it on the whole cake, but I am going to make a maple glaze to go on here. So, you know, if somebody wants a little bit of glaze on their gingerbread cake, they can pour it on there. So while this cake is baking, we'll make that glaze. So I'm just going to keep stirring until I get all this mixed up. I've got all my butter and eggs and sugar in there. Now, I'm going to add just a little bit more of my molasses water. I'm not going to add the whole thing. because just like any other time that you're baking a homemade cake, you really never know how much liquid, because it could take more liquid tomorrow than it does today. It has to do with, you know, the weather. You may have added a little bit more flour, just anything. You can see it's coming together pretty good. It does look like a bowl of mud, don't it? But it's not. It's molasses. Molasses is good for you. And I read a lot of gardening books, and I watch a lot of gardening shows. And there's several times that I've seen people say that a good molasses, unsulfured molasses, is good for your plants, for your garden. So I guess if I took this molasses water out there, that's what they're talking about, to use with your plants when you're watering them. So I thought that was pretty neat information. But I think I've got it to the consistency that I want. I'm going to move this out of the way so y'all can see. And you can see the consistency of the batter. And that's about where you want it. So now I'm going to take my 9x13 pan, and we're going to pour our batter in there. And we're going to put it in a 350-degree oven. And it is going to cook a while. It's going to cook anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes. I'm going to check it at 40 minutes because I've got a really good gas oven, and it gets really hot, and it bakes really good. It's a good oven. So there's our gingerbread cake. I'm going to tap it a few times on the bar. And there we go. We'll put it in the oven, like I said, 40 minutes. And when it gets done, we'll come back and we'll take it out of the oven. Hey, my cakes come out of the oven, and in my oven it took about 35 minutes. So it's going to take, I think, anywhere from 35 to 40 minutes. It just all depends on your oven. And here's the cake, and I just think it's pretty. It's a really dark color, and it smells wonderful, or I think it does, because I love the smell of the molasses and the ginger and the ground clove. Everything just smells good. So what we're going to do is I want to cut it, and I want to taste it with just butter. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make a little bit of glaze for it too. What I got here is probably, I don't know, about 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. And I'm going to put probably a teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm going to put, I've got some pure maple syrup here. I think I'm going to put a couple teaspoons. And then I've got just a little bit of water. I'm going to add just a little bit of water. And I'm going to stir it up. And I might have to add a little bit more to it to get it to the consistency that I want. So it's a little bit thick, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water to it. You just want to make kind of a thin glaze. So you can see it's coming together where you can drizzle it. And that maple and that vanilla together is going to be really good. So I think that's about right. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to cut the cake. And it's still really hot. I'm just going to cut around the corner here. It's coming out really easy. Let me get me another fork. It's really moist. But you can see how dark that cake is through and through. You can smell that dark molasses. Now this is going to have to be made to your taste, because in a minute Mr. Brown's going to explain to you the difference between molasses. And like I said, I used the unsulfured blackstrap molasses, and it's at your pure form, and it's the stoutest molasses, right, Mr. Brown? So that's what I used. Now if you want a sweeter one that's not so stout, and we'll discuss that here in a little bit. Now, I can't tell you for sure what kind of molasses my grandmother used. I don't remember. It's been too many years ago. I don't know if it was this stout of molasses. It seems like I remember it being blackstrap, but I don't know. It's so dark that it looks like chocolate cake. I'm going to taste it. You can taste the molasses in it, but it's not real stout. Of course, the butter makes it good, so you want to taste it while it's still warm. I'll get you a fork. And I've got this maple glaze. Let's put a little bit of that on it. I'm just going to drizzle it. Tell me how that tastes.
The cake was really good. It tastes like an old-timey cake. It's not your sweet icing type cake, but it's very, if you like old-fashioned ingredients, and I like it a lot. So there's a big controversy about molasses, and I have found a common denominator that is pretty close to what seems to be a pattern of the research I've done on it. This little bit right here is through Medical News Today. Light molasses. This is the syrup made from the first boiling. It is the lightest in color and sweetest in taste. It is most commonly used in baking. Dark molasses. This is a type created from the second boiling. It's thicker, darker, less sweet. It can also be used in baking, but produces a more distinct color and flavor. And then we get to the blackstrap. This is the syrup produced after the third boiling. It is the thickest and darkest in color, and also tends to have a bitter taste. Blackstrap molasses is the most concentrated form and contains the most vitamins and minerals. For that reason, it is said to have the most health benefits. Now, we talked about unsulfured and sulfured. Molasses labeled as sulfured has sulfur dioxide added to it. Sulfur dioxide acts as a preservative and prevents it from spoiling. Sulfured varieties tend to have a less sweet than unsulfured products, or less sweet taste, less sweet than the unsulfured. And I know that they use the sulfur dioxide on young green cane, and that's just to keep it from spoiling. So I hope this little bit of information clears things up. And that's your medical news for the day.
This recipe, like I said, it's your traditional old-fashioned molasses gingerbread cake. And I wanted to bring you the true blue one. I didn't want just any recipe. So I hope you like this recipe. And I got some other things coming up. And one of them I think y'all are really going to like is I'm going to make some homemade ice cream probably in a couple days. And I'm going to make buttermilk ice cream. And I don't know if anybody's ever ate it, but I tasted some the other day and it was really good. So I was anxious and wanted to make some of my own. And then I've got a product review too that I need to do. And it is some condiment jars that I want to show y'all. So y'all come back and see me. And God bless everybody. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And we'll see you guys later.